because that means that it will retain enough for the plants to grow with, but it won't sit there and rot the roots. So the 10 is, does your soil retain water? Most of us have soil retaining, water that does retain soil around here because it's basically that it's fairly clayey. There's not much sand, just straight sand around here. If it were the beach in South Africa, I'd be saying that's quite different. Okay, so I've been talking about pH and trace elements and NPK. So there is a test kit which you can buy. This came in a beautiful little packet, little box, but knowing me, I throw things away. So this is a test kit which costs you about $25. It will test your pH, right? It will test how much nitrogen you've got, how much phosphorus you've got, and how much potassium you've got. And it's done with a series of little pills which you dilute with a bit of soil. And it's very simple to do, and it gives you full instructions how to do it. It's available from Feces, and it's available at, I haven't seen one at Sugargane this year, but I bought mine from Sugargane, yeah. And they're pretty good. That's, for those people who are a bit keener on gardening than...
Excuse me, Alison, how many tests can you get with the kit? How many times can you do it?
I think I got about 12 tablets, and you can buy the tablets separately.
So you can have several tests.
Yeah, oh yeah. And you can buy these separately so that you can use it, time and time again. So it's worth it. There is an electronic, from Lee Valley, there's an electronic pH tester. That's $137, and I'm afraid I'm not prepared to spend that. But you can buy little pH testers which have got 2 prongs, and they run off just a little battery. They're only about $20. So if you want to test just pH, because pH, the balance of acidity and alkalinity is where you're going to get optimum growth. So that home test kit is the one that I was talking about there. But you can do a visual test. Your leaf growth, the leaf color, whether you've got droopy plants, whether you've got lots of bugs, whether you've got certain weeds, they will all tell you whether your soil is somewhere in the right pH line, and whether you need to add any of the fertilizers or trace elements. So if just looking at these pictures, the dandelion at the top, now dandelions grow A, in acidic soil, and B, where the soil has been compacted. So if you've got lots of dandelions in your lawn, you need to get in and dig holes in your lawn to aerate it. And also probably put some lime on it so that it's not as acidic. They have their uses. They bring lots of trace elements up from very, very deep. If you've tried to dig out dandelions, you'll know that their roots stretch. And there's a guy actually in PEI who sells $140,000 worth of dandelion root to the Japanese every year. For tea. They make tea out of it. Then he literally does. He grows the roots that long. So I don't know.
I think so.
Does he? Yeah.
2 years ago.
Ah, right. Yeah.
I've been waiting for them to come over and get them.
Yeah, I could sell him plenty. I think mine are not that deep, actually. If you look at the picture on the left, that is powdery mildew. That is actually aided and abetted by a lack of certain trace elements. As I said last week, if you've got, or if you had last year, little baby zucchinis that suddenly went grey at the end and just went, that actually was a lack of calcium, which was a problem because it was both a fungus and the fact that it was a wet year. And so that's why a lot of people's zucchini didn't grow well. Zucchini that never failed. Right. And of course, on the right, we've got our friend the cutworm. Now, cutworms will come in if they're allowed to take out your stuff, but it's because your soils are not that good. So they like a very acidic soil. They will work best in acidic soil. So that is why we need to concentrate on alkalinity, acidity, the fertilizers and the trace elements, so that you can really get the optimum soil for your plants to grow in. So pH is acid or alkaline. 0 is acid, 14 is alkaline. Most New Brunswick soils naturally tend to be acidic, basically because we've got so many trees, and trees, especially the pine trees, they will drop their needles. Needles are acidic. So what we need to do, and somebody got an idea that I don't like lime. I do like lime. We need to use lime or limestone, which is calcium carbonate, to rectify this. You can get it either in a pelletized form, or you can buy it cheaper. Actually, they use it for cleaning out animal stalls. You can buy it for $6.83 for 20 kilos. You know, the pelletized is about $20, so you can use it as a powder. It's more difficult to spread, and I was trying to spread it last Friday, and Friday was quite a breezy day down our way, and it was all over the place, including all over me. I came in looking like a sort of ghost, and my husband looks at me and says, "You better go and wash off." Anyway, so most vegetables like 6 to 6.8 pH, which is slightly acidic. It's not the sort of 3 or 4, which is what peat moss by itself is. So if you're putting in a lot of peat moss, like I've had to try and get my soil less clayey, you're going to have to put in quite a bit of lime to offset that really, really acidic peat moss. So don't go putting a whole lot of apple cores in to your garden, because apples are actually only 2.9 to about 3.3 pH. So it's really quite, it's quite acidic. And I was surprised that lemonade pulp is so acidic, but that's what they say. Okay, so we're looking at about 6 to 7 in the pH line. So if you do your pH test and it comes out a nice sort of dirty green, you don't want it the bright green and you don't want it the bright orange on this. It's a sort of dirty green in between. That's where you want to be for most vegetables. Potatoes like it more acidic. They're about that's why if you're breaking in new ground, they often say plant potatoes first, because they like it acidic. They like about a 5.3 to a 6.3. So that's worth looking at. NPK. Now, laugh at me. Last year I could not get my head round phosphorus and potassium. I kept getting them muddled up. I might do it again this year, so rather than go by the notes rather than me. Nitrogen is good for leaf development and sturdy plants. So this alfalfa mix that I advocate, that is a high nitrogen based mix. So don't use it on your root plants, because you'll grow beautiful leafy tops, but you won't get really good beetroot or those sort of carrots or whatever. Okay, phosphorus, which is the P in the NPK, is good for development of roots, stems, and general plant health. So if you haven't got that, if you're missing phosphorus, which is something that you can get out of dulse or fish emulsions, mostly, your general plant health is not going to be particularly good. And then K, which is, if you remember back to your periodic table, it's actually kalium. Potassium, potash. Potash is your stuff that comes out of your stove, out of your barbecue. Chuck it on your compost heap, chuck it on your ground. It's good stuff. It helps the plants bear fruit and set seed. So that's the sort of basics of the three. And it is shown as a ratio. So if you buy organic fertilizer, that's fine. If you buy inorganic fertilizer, that's the petrochemical one, it will also have NPK on it. But please try and buy the organic if you can. But you should be able to find out what the NPK is of any compost that you buy as well, because that should be on the bag. So when you've done these tests, if you do these tests, you'll see which ones you need. We have very, very high potassium levels, because where our vegetable patch used to be a sawmill yard. So all that old shavings is still in the ground. So we have very high potassium. So I have to buy not a sort of, the normal is a 10, 10, 10. but I'm buying a 21 because we've got no nitrogen, 21, 10, 0, which is quite difficult to get, I can tell you.
What's in wood ash?
That's the potassium.
Is it?
Yeah, that's potash. Yeah. Potash mine. Shh. Banana squares. Don't talk to me about that. It's a terrible place, but still.
Banana peels and potato peels.
Yes.
High potassium.
Yeah, they're very high potassium. If ever you want roses to really grow well, chop up your banana peels and dig them in just around your roots. And about, if your plant's as tall as that, anything sort of a 90-degree angle from that, you plant around and they will grow brilliantly. So, animal manures, pros and cons. Where did this come from? If you're buying it direct from a farmer, is he feeding his animals masses of antibiotics, antidepressants? Chickens get antidepressants when they're in these big barns because otherwise they all go freaking out because they can't be that close to each other. This is my little black hen, by the way, at the bottom there. She's one of 5 and they just wander all over the place. The only problem is I've got 2 new brown hens and I have a nasty suspicion they're going to have to be banned from the vegetable patch because they scratch. Anyway, so is the feed that the animals get natural and organic? Because an awful lot of these feeds have an awful lot of things in them which are not nice. Please use well-rotted manure. Fresh manure is deadly. It actually burns plants, especially the high nitrogen manures like chicken manure. It will actually burn your roots. So don't use fresh. The best is organic sheep, horse, cow, and chicken, in that order, really. Please don't use pig if you can. It has too much chance of having all sorts of pathogens in it because you don't know what those pigs are being fed, especially if people are feeding them things that they're buying from food, stuff that they're getting from restaurants or they're getting slops. You don't know what's going in. And pig manure and it's smelly. So, yeah. Sheep manure is probably the most balanced, followed by horse, followed by cow, followed by chicken. There are 3 or 4 very good websites. There's one from the University of Lethbridge about what the pH value and the NPK values are of different manures. It's basically for big farmers, but it's quite interesting. So, not that I'm against them. I use my own chicken manure, but it's well rotted. And quite honestly, the chickens just sort of wander around, so I can never get enough to make much of it. There are other people who say that using animal manures as a base for compost teas, it's a bit iffy. Again, I would not recommend that. I would rather use something like alfalfa or compost in itself as a starter for a compost tea, rather than an animal manure, especially a fresh animal manure, because again, it's going to burn. And Andy has exactly that problem at the moment.